Hi everyone, this is Deb Canham. It's Monday night and it's Serger night, and what we're going to be looking at this evening is neckbands on the Serger. So a good subject. Of course, Sergers are awesome for knits, so many people are using them for that. And of course, knits are really popular at the moment. And if you've never made a knit top, I recommend you have a look at it and try again, because on the Serger it's a whole lot easier than the sewing machine. The sewing machine tends to stretch the fabric, and so for that reason a lot of people feel that knits isn't for them. But if you have a Serger, it's a different story. So please do come on in, say hi and where you're calling from. I'm going to be demoing tonight on the Vibrant, which is a 4-thread Serger. My Triumph's actually being serviced, and in any case I like to use different machines, and a lot of you have 4-thread Sergers. So what else was I going to say on that? Oh, I was going to say, for those of you that have never come across my videos before, my name is Deb Canham. I'm a baby lock educator. I tend to specialize in the Serger, but truly I do embroidery and garment making and other things. And actually probably my background is more garment making than anything. But that said, I like to consider myself a designer. And everything you see behind me I have designed. Most of them are projects for the Serger, some for the sewing machine. But you can see more of my projects on my website, but we'll get to that later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn you around and we're going to discuss what we're going to do with this neckband. So this is always my challenging moment. I think I've got it. Yes, good. Right, let me move you over. I'm not going to do pretties today. I'm just going to get straight into the meat of it. So what I have here is, this is actually the little t-shirt people make when they do, let me change the thing, when they do my knit class, and you can see it has a small neckline with a neckband, and that's actually what I'm going to show you how to do today. Because although I do have a knit binder and I do like to use my knit binder, there's always times when you are better off not using it. Actually, in a double band, I don't have a picture of that with me, but it is in my knits book. But also, sometimes for V-necks, it's easier just to do it this way. And for a lot of people who don't have cover and chain stitch, this is their only option. And it's still a great one. It's still a great one on the Serger. So let me take you straight into how I do it. Well, actually, let me just discuss one other thing. I know one of the problems is, I think there's three main problems that people have with necklines. The first one is that sometimes when you make a t-shirt, the neckline can stand up, somewhat like a turtleneck, or I always say a vicar's collar, and it's meant to lay flat. And I think there's a number of reasons for that, and I think partly one of them is actually the patterns themselves. Patterns come with the t-shirt and also the neckline pattern, and really at the end of the day, the person who designed the pattern doesn't always know how stretchy your fabric is. So it could be that with your fabric, you need to have it a different size to that in the pattern. But the way I'm going to show you how to do it is the way that we do work on the Serger, where we sew everything flat. So in other words, we're going to sew the neckband in with one shoulder open. Okay, so we're going to sew one shoulder, sew the neckband in, and then sew the shoulder shut. And again, some of you are having problems with the bulkiness in the neckband. I'm going to show you how to deal with that. And I can't remember the third thing right now, but I'm sure it will come to me in time. So let's get straight into how I do it. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to cut out a neckband, and because you actually don't know how much of it you're going to use, you need to cut out bigger than you need and fold it in half and press it. And a lot of people have trouble with the with the spandex and the neckbands. They tend to curl up at the edges and give you problems. So this is how I suggest you do it, and it works for me. Take your neckband and put it on your ironing board and steam it. Put lots of steam on it so it's almost damp. And then leave it there to dry. And once it's dry, you'll find it will be less curly. And then you're going to carry it carefully to your serger like it was a piece of rolled out pastry. Now, I often see people, there's something about a piece of knit that people always want to get hold of either end and pull it. If you do that, it's going to roll up again. Okay, so be warned. So here I have it. And then the next thing I'm going to do is you can see here, I've marked a line on here. And that was the other thing that was the problem, I remember now. Some people have problems with necklines being the same width all the way around. They can be fat, thin, fat, thin, fat, thin. So this is a system I've devised to cope with that. So here we have the folded pressed neckband. And what I'm going to do is take a measure, and I'm going to measure from the folded edge. And in this case, I'm just doing 1/2 inch. And I'm going to draw a line. I used a great big black Sharpie just to be sure you could see it. I might use something like a friction pen or chalk normally. But you're going to draw a line 1/2 inch from the edge. Now that is going to be the finished width of your neckband. So for instance, it's going to be from this neckline here to the folded edge. That's what the width is going to be. If you want to have your neckband bigger, then you're going to perhaps go 3/4 inch and perhaps cut the neckband a bit wider in that case. This one's actually 2 inches. But as I say, it's just for my sample here. It's not part of a pattern or anything. So there we are. We've marked the line. And what that's going to do is guarantee that we keep it the same width all the way around. Of course, there are other conditions to it, but let's see what we're going to do next. The next thing we're going to do is we are actually going to sew the raw edges of this band on the serger, and we're going to be stretching it as we go. And the reason for that is if you stretch it, it's going to start curving. So let me show you one I've already done. But do you see how this one is already curving? And that's what we want on our neckline. If we don't stretch it and we leave it flat, it's going to stand up like a turtleneck or a vicar's collar. So that's the secret to it first, to stretch it. And it could be we'll stretch it more, but it's a good starting point. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. So I'm just going to move you, so if you get giddy, look away. Right, this is the Baby Lock Vibrant 4-thread serger. I love it. It's one of our low-end machines, but it does a great job. And actually, this is really a great thing. This helps you set the seam allowance for your serging. And I really hope they introduce this to all their machines because it's really a great piece of equipment. But I'm going to take it off for a moment. So I'm going to take my neckband. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to hit you. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry about the beginning, because if you have an error anywhere, it's always in the beginning and end. So I always make bigger and cut down, or invariably do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this raw edge along the knife. I don't want to be trimming anything. I just want to join those two edges together and stretch the neckband. So I'm just going to hold on to my thread chain, although I'm not too worried about it because I'm right back to the needles. So off we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the needles into the neckband, and then I'm going to start stretching it. I might pull you out a bit so you can see that a bit more. Okay. So you can see I'm applying pressure to this neckband, and I know you're going to say to me, how much pressure? How much are you stretching it? Well, this is a cotton jersey, so it's not super stretchy. If this was a spandex, it would stretch more. But I'm stretching it fairly firmly, but I'm trying to keep up an even tension. The other thing I didn't say at the beginning was when I cut this out, this is a double cotton jersey, and the stretch is actually only going in this direction, okay? It's not a four-way stretch, it's just a two-way stretch. So you cut the neckband out with the stretch because you want the stretch. So just coming up to the end. And I have actually shaved a bit off there, I didn't mean to, but it won't hurt. So the other nifty thing about this serger is it has its own little knife built into the bed of the machine. So here we have my stretched neck. You can see it's starting to curve, which is great. So the next thing that I'm going to do, which I've actually already done to save time, is I have sewn one shoulder together on my t-shirt. You can see it's only a part of a t-shirt, but I have sewn one shoulder together and I have pressed it. And I actually always press my seams towards the front because it's actually less noticeable. In the old days, we always used to press them towards the back, but change of thought on that. So here we have my neckband, and I told you that sometimes the very beginning isn't quite right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch beyond the very beginning so that I'm past there. And actually what I'm going to be doing this time round is I am going to be, I did that wrong way around, I'm going to be following my line. On every single serger you will find on the feet some lines that mark where your needles are. And in the case of the Vibrant, it's this little line here. Can you see it? It's probably just about visible. And I am going to put that over my black drawn line. And I'm going to keep it there, okay? So I'm just going to get started and get past that very beginning bit. And you can see I'm cutting some off. Just holding onto my thread chain to encourage it in that early bit. So there you go. I'm well into it now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the neckline. So with the right side of the fabric facing up, I'm going to pop this t-shirt neckline underneath the band. And I do have a couple of things to say about that. You can see that I have not gone to my sewing machine and stay stitched that neck edge, because if I had, I would have stretched it. Okay, so do not stay stitch on your sewing machine, you will stretch your neckline. But at the same time, when I go through this process, I've got to make sure that I do not stretch this piece of the t-shirt, the neckband, because it will distort it. And I could possibly use the differential feed if I was using something very stretchy like a spandex. But in this case, it's not too stretchy, so I'm not going to worry about it. But what I am going to do is I am going to stretch this band again as I go. So I'm going to match the raw edges here, and I'm going to keep that line over there. So quite a few things to watch for, but I think I could do it. So let me just get my needles into the neckband. And you'll see that I'm chopping off some of my stitches. And that may give me frayed ends. I happen to know it won't give me too many frayed sections. But if that was a problem, you could have made your neckband wider. It's not going to bother me for this. So once I get into the t-shirt and the neckband, I'm going to start stretching the neckband. But look, I am not stretching the neck line of the t-shirt underneath. Okay, and I'm just working in small areas because I'm working on a small curve. This is a small t-shirt, so I can only match the edges a short distance. And I'm still applying tension on the neckband to stretch it a little. Keeping that black line right under the marking so that I know the needle's going in there, so that it's the same width all the way. And I'm coming over a thicker part here, and I don't think it's going to give me any trouble, but I'm going to be aware of it because I know people complain about coming over seams. And I'm going to look for it. And if I think there's a problem, I'm going to raise my foot and push it back. It just so happens there isn't. So keeping my raw edges even. Richard, are you opening my M&M's bag? Yes. That's from my Missy project. Don't tear it. Oh. Sorry, I can hear Richard opening the chocolates that he found that I was going to make a bag out of. How funny. Right, so I'm still matching the raw edges. And the line. And here I am coming up to the end. And you can see I've been really careful just to stretch the neckband, but not the t-shirt underneath. Oops, I always forget I've got that nifty cutter. Right. So here we have it. Of course, it's going to look better when I pressed it, but you see how perfectly even it is all the way around because I followed that black band. Pretty neat, huh? And you can see it's going to lay flat. Now, at this point, I would go to my ironing board and I'd use my ham. This is a ham. And what you're going to do is you're going to put your neckline over it. Just going to move you down a bit so you can see what I'm doing. You're going to put your neckline over it and you're going to press it so that the seam underneath is coming down. And then when you press it, you're going to put some steam on it and then you're going to let it dry and you're going to go all the way around pressing the neckline. But I think you'll agree, it's a really nice neckline and it was super easy. Okay, so what happens next? Well, let me tell you, I'm going to, as I said, steam it, press it, and then I'm going to sew the shoulder up. So I have already done that because I use my sewing machine. Now, I can do it on my serger, and I sometimes do, but I think it's easiest this way. So do you see what I've done? I've matched my shoulder seams, and I went to my sewing machine, and what I did was I just sewed along the neckband to here for about 1.5 inches. It needs to be longer than your foot, and I'll explain that in a minute. So what I'm going to do now is I'm still going to sew this on the serger, but by using the sewing machine, I've made sure that it's not going to move and it matches nicely. If I show you the match, my stitching is coming undone, but if I show you the match on this side, you can see it's perfect. So what I need to do now is I need to cut away my seam allowance. So I'm going to be careful I don't cut my fingers off doing it around this way. And some people, and the other thing to this is I'm going to press this seam very flat, okay? This is the time to press it flat. And I hear people saying use a hammer. Well, it's a lot of fun using a hammer, so do go ahead and do that. I know I enjoy it. But I didn't actually use a hammer on this. I just used lots of steam. And actually, if you have one of those wooden clappers, a wooden clapper will flatten this even more. So here I am. I've cut off my seam allowance. Can you see that? Moving you back to the machine. And what I'm going to do is I am going to lift my foot and I am going to put this folded edge, this neckband edge, all the way up to the needles. And I am going to put the, I don't know if you can see it really, but here, I lift it. Can you see that it's right against the knife? And that was my reason for cutting off that excess. If I hadn't cut that off, I could only have gone as far as the knife. But because I cut all the seam allowance off, I can get right back to the knife. And I've got my raw edge right against the knife. So using the knife as a guide, but my folded edges are right back to the needle. So when I'm going to raise my needles, and I've just realized I actually have a broken one. How did I break that? I love doing demoing. Something always goes wrong. Well, I'm going to finish it off with a 3 thread. I didn't even see it break. So what I'm going to do is I am going to now sew it. And then when I get to this section, my knife's actually going to be involved. So let's go. And I'm just going to lift it, pull it, because it looked like it got stuck a bit, and keep going. Right, what I'm going to do is turn that round the right way, and I want to show you the neckband. Now, isn't that pretty cool? You can actually see my blue thread I used on my sewing machine, and I could take that out. And then what I would do is I would take my thread chain, which I don't have much of one because I had that thread come undone, and I'm going to show you how I deal with that. I'm going to thread it up. It's going to be a bit short because of that break. and I'm going to thread it into my stitches on the back. And sometimes your thread chain can really help you, because if it's just slightly off, you can use your thread chain to pull it and it will straighten out. So finishing off my stitches, and there you go. Of course, it's not perfect because it came undone at the beginning. So what I actually could do is I could go back over it, but I'm not going to for the sake of this video. But see what a nice finish it gives you? And then what I would do is I would steam that. See how nice and flat it lays? It would lay flatter if I steamed it, trust me. And then what I would do is I would actually leave it. Now, a lot of people like to sew round and secure their seam down here. I don't feel the need to because it lays nice and flat. But let me tell you, I might do that with my cover stitch, but I absolutely would not do that with a sewing machine because it's going to stretch it. Okay? So that's basically how I do those necklines, and you can see they are super, super easy. I think I've given you a couple of really good tips there. I think the first one being to mark your line on the neckband so that it's all going to be the same length. The other one is to stretch it before you start and then stretch it again after. And the third one's to cut away your seam allowance on the shoulder so that you can really get into the, get this section and to the needles, this section against the knife, and then sew. And once you get to here, as I said, the knife's going to cut that section off. So I have here just a brief rundown. I'm just going to quickly run through it just to remind you what I did. I cut out the neckband in the direction of stretch. I folded it and pressed the neckband in half hot dog style. I love using that word. It's an American word. I learned it. And then I steam it. I steam it really heavily, and then I leave it to dry. And then what I do is I mark a line parallel with the fold for the width of the finished neckband that I want. I then stitch the raw edges together using my knife as a guide, in other words, not trimming anything, and I stretch it as I go. And what that does is it causes the neckband to curve, which is what we want to stop it standing up like a turtleneck. Then I place the neckband back on the machine and I sew the first sort of 4 inches, because invariably the beginning and the end is where you're not quite right, or not quite even. And then I'm going to stretch the band again, but I'm really going to qualify I am not stretching the t-shirt neckband. And you could see I just went round in short sections, matching the raw edges. Then I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch the first part of that shoulder seam from the neckband down about 2 inches on my sewing machine. And I'm really just using that as a basting stitch. And then I'm going to cut off the excess seam allowance, which will allow me to lift my foot and put the neckband folded edges right back to the needles and the cut edge where I've trimmed off to the knife. And then I'm just going to sew that shoulder seam. It's imperative that you steam well and press well, and you're always going to get a better neckline with something like a ham. It's curved. So I really hope that was a useful video. I think it had lots of good information in it. I know somebody's going to know my stitches, my stitch settings. I didn't use the Triumph, but if I had, it would have been stitch width 6.5 to 7, stitch length 2.5, and stitch selector A. I just want to say on the Vibrant, and that would have been a 4-thread overlock on the Triumph. Interestingly, on the Vibrant, it's called Super Stretch Stitch. And I think that's another point. People often say, what stitch should I use for knits on the Triumph? The stretchiest stitch is your 4-thread overlock. Your 3-thread overlock will do it, but your 4-thread overlock is a better stitch for that. So on the Vibrant, you're going to look for the Super Stretch threading chart. And I had needle 1 on tension 5, needle 2 on tension 4, upper looper on 4, lower looper on 4, and this stitch width set, knife section set to 6.5. But be prepared to vary it.